welcome to another episode of Meal Prep Monday. I'm your host and founder of Prep Dish, Allison Schaaf. In today's episode, I am discussing protein-rich breakfast ideas that your kids will actually eat. Before I get into today's content, I have an email message to read from Prep Dish subscriber Heather. Heather writes, "Thanks, Allison, for creating Prep Dish. I am so impressed. I have never liked most vegetables, and I've had to Google some to figure out what they were. Swiss chard and the squash. I also ate broccoli for the first time last week in the stir fry and made the soup tonight. My husband and I loved it. Everything has been delicious, and I have had fun learning how to cook vegetables. This is truly life-changing for me. Thanks again, Heather." Heather, thank you so much for sharing. I loved reading this message. I'll often read messages about, Prep Dish introducing the kids to salmon, but hearing that we are introducing you to fun new vegetables and just expanding your palate, I love hearing that. And it sounds like you're truly enjoying the vegetables. And that's my goal. If healthy doesn't taste delicious, then, what's the point? No one's going to stick with it. That's always been my viewpoint. And I'm glad, again, that you're enjoying the meals. If you are listening to this and you have not tried our Prep Dish meal plans, we have a 2-week free trial set up special for listeners of this podcast at prepdish.com/MPM. That is also linked in the show notes. Okay, so for today, I'm continuing on our mini series on protein. And last week, if you haven't listened in on last week's episode, I talked just generally, benefits of protein and why I find that 30 grams is the magic number. And I talked about how the 30 grams of protein, the real key that I find that's kind of shifted for me into maybe not getting quite enough protein in my day overall into hitting the mark that I wanted to hit. And that was breakfast. And I find this is true for most people. Lunch, dinner, a little easier to get enough protein. Breakfast, it's tricky, right? Even if you're eating eggs, 3 eggs get you to 18 grams of protein. So you're still not even close with 3 eggs. And come on, after 3, I don't know. I will eat 3 eggs at breakfast. I'm not going to eat 4 or 5. And it depends on the day if I eat 2 or 3. So I know that I can't do it just by slapping an egg on a piece of toast or something. So I've become very intentional about my breakfast choices. At my house, we have a breakfast rotation where I rotate what we eat each day of the week. So, for example, I know every Sunday that we're going to have eggs and sweet potatoes and some sort of protein. And, I'll kind of shift that. Maybe some weeks it's a potato and eggs and shift the protein or whatever. But I have a set rhythm that I use throughout the weeks. It helps the kids. They know what we're having for breakfast every day. It also helps because I've been able to calculate the protein amount in all of those various breakfasts and what I need to do in order to hit my goal of 30 grams of protein and be intentional with that. Now, the question that has come up is, so what about the kids? Well, we all eat the same thing, but I'm not focused on them. I have 0 goals of what they eat or don't eat at a meal. If you've listened to any of my, picky eating or philosophy on feeding kids, I take the approach of, it's my job to decide, what I'm serving and when I'm serving it. And then they get to decide, what and how much of those food items that they eat. So, they are offered the same foods that I am eating, and then they choose how much of those they want to eat. I will say it's interesting to observe that, we have one day of the week where it's oatmeal, and I will have some sort of protein on the side with my oatmeal. And I have one kid who, oh my goodness, all he cares about is that protein. The other 2, they like it. They'll usually have it, but sometimes they won't. But there's one, and it's that is his main thing. So I don't know. They are so intuitive, I guess, in their eating when they're younger, and it's interesting to observe. But yeah, I don't have any specific goals in mind when it comes to, kids. I do. And my goal is that they are able to, listen to their body and pay attention to their hunger cues and eat in that way. I know what I'm offering is balanced and wholesome and, healthy, made from scratch foods. And then they're deciding, how much to eat of that and, what their body's feeling like that day. But yeah, when it comes to the protein items, I will say every now and then, a few things. Let me back up first. When it comes to protein at breakfast, probably the biggest shift I've made since I did these episodes a year ago, I did kind of a series on protein and specifically protein at breakfast. And I know I was doing like ground meat and making some homemade sausages. I have gone even doubled down on that even more. And one thing I've started doing, as I'm recording this, it's summertime. So one thing I've been doing now is, if we grill out steaks or if we have roasted chicken or if we have, pork chops, I will increase the amount of protein we have at our meals and use those leftover proteins with my breakfast. Just, slice them up and heat them up, serve them with eggs and, sweet potatoes or whatever is on the menu that day, or even as a side to my oatmeal. But that way I'm not relying heavily on processed sausages or bacon. We do have bacon on Saturdays usually, but I try and keep that to the only day of the week. I love bacon. I don't think it's a food that I need to be eating every day of the week, even if it means I'm hitting my protein goals. So that would be the encouragement I have is, try and see, are there ways that you can make sure that the protein you are eating, at breakfast is not always processed. And that's something I find it's not talked a lot about in the protein world. Everyone's like, oh, more protein is better. And I do think that's true. I'm all in. I see the benefits of increasing protein, but I want to make sure that those are not always processed forms of protein. So yeah, my number one tip there is definitely rely on, sure, you could cook a steak from scratch on Monday morning, but I prefer to just, have some leftovers from the weekend that I then throw in with my breakfast. Yeah, that is how I am handling breakfast right now. I will link the exact rhythm or rotation that I use of meals at our house, the breakfast ones, pretty much the same as it was last year. We've been doing it probably 14 months now and still doing the same rotation, still enjoying the foods. Some things I'll switch up. Like in the winter, I'll do more cooked oatmeals, and in the summer, more just like soaked oats or like a oat and chia pudding that I do overnight or something. So, seasonal changes like that, but overall sticking to the same pattern. It's made my mornings so much easier. I don't have to think what's for breakfast. It's the same thing, but every day it's different, if that makes sense. So still working out really well for us. Okay, that's all I have for today's episode. A reminder that if you want to try out the Prep Dish meal plans, we do have that 2-week free trial set up at prepdish.com/MPM. And if you're looking for 30 grams or more per serving on your meals super fast, that is baked into the formula of those meals. Okay, that's all I have for this week. I will be back again next Monday with another episode.